Again and again, I read these dark, mysterious lines. It wasn't unusual for dramatic works such as comics to add moments like this, but as I continued to read, I couldn't help but feel this was very off for a Superman book. Not a single word of encouragement or hope was to be found. Our titular hero just kept silent as everyone around him spewed forth messages of hate and despair. The artwork grew increasingly disturbing with each new page until eventually I began to question if this was some kind of joke. Superman walked down the streets of Metropolis and observed the rotting bodies of many heroes and villains from comic books. To my surprise, some of the characters were not even DC owned. After a while, the story grew violent as Superman began to destroy what was left of Metropolis, the destruction more graphic than normal, even in the more extreme editions of the comic. Soon Metropolis was destroyed, and a two-page panel depicted the carnage, bodies laying on the street, what looked like children impaled on spikes formed by debris and figures hanging lifelessly from nooses tied to street lamps and signposts. Finally, the comic ended with a full-page panel on Superman, staring directly as if looking to the reader, a speech bubble prominently stating, "For years you watched us suffer. Now it's your turn, hero." I didn't quite understand what that meant, and at the time I was still a bit disturbed by the whole comic so promptly. Put the thing away and never gave it a second glance. After such a horrid comic, I decided I needed a change of pace, so got out one of my old Batman comics, the old and goofy version of The Dark Knight. Most people hated, but I, somewhat ashamedly, have always rather enjoyed. I read the comic. Its old humor and camp style, a refreshing difference from the horrors and misery of No Heroes. This was how I remembered the old classic DC, fun and enjoyable. I got halfway through the comic and had just opened a new page when my eyes grew wide with shock. I almost dropped the comic as I saw to my utter disbelief a full-page panel of Superman in that disturbing art style and staring once more from the comic page, the prominent speech bubble stating, "You don't get to be happy, hero." We've all heard stories about haunted video games, lost episodes of beloved cartoons or TV shows, but there has always been a medium that, until recently, seems to have been immune to such tales. The humble comic book. Now, before you ask, I don't for one second believe that there is a massive conspiracy or some hidden reason for the event I am about to share with you. I think what happened was an example of something that has no reason, no grand scheme. It simply happened. I hope it never happens again. So, what happened? I'll tell you. I am a collector of DC comics, and as such, I have always had a soft spot for Superman. Anyone who is into comics knows that some titles go dark and disturbing imagery, so when strange or gruesome things occur, most rightfully dismiss it as part of the story. This was how I first reacted when I got my hands on what I believed to be a new Superman title named No Heroes. The cover was completely black, and the Superman logo was broken and decayed looking. Again, I thought this was all part of the story. I had flipped through a few pages before purchasing, and to my surprise it was a fairly standard Superman book, so I bought it without much thought. Taking it home with me, I sat down and began to read the comic in more detail. As soon as I opened it, I was greeted with artwork that was drastically different from what I had seen at a glance in the store. Everything had a red tint to it, and the characters were all angry and battered looking. Superman especially looked extremely menacing, and at as I read the text appearing on speech bubbles, I admit I was pretty shocked. This was not marked as a mature title, and DC had, until fairly recently, been pretty uptight about how Superman was and was not to be portrayed, making what I read pretty confusing, to say the least. Heroes aren't real. It's all fake. Everything's a fucking lie. People aren't going to save you. They'll watch you bleed. You deserve to die. Life is a fatal disease which slowly eats away at us. You're not perfect. You're no hero.